So we're going to try and go through the process of using Rhino as a modeling tool, but make sure that we get something out at the end of it. And this is going to be really helpful from a point of view of how you then think about preparing for a tutorial session with your design tutor, or preparing for a meeting with a client when you're in practice, or indeed basically any way that you decide to use digital tools in your workflow. One of the things that I tend to work as much as possible with, or do as much as possible, is to not spend too long in one mode of operation, in one piece of software or one thing that I'm trying to do. After about half an hour, your brain cannot keep focusing on that same thing without getting incredibly bored or just kind of shutting down. And I showed you right at the very beginning something that I see people doing, and a number of you over the summer task put your hands up and said you absolutely understood what this was all about. I'm going to import my people, and I'm going to hope that this actually runs. Is it working? Let's find out. Oh, it's probably because it's synchronizing some files. Oh, come on. Here we go. But one of the things that you'll see a lot of the time, I'm just going to set my grid up properly. I keep meaning to set this up in my template. But anyway, here we go. Is, oh, wow, that's going to make an amazing wall. And it's going to be so good. Oh, maybe I need a bit of a roof. So I'm going to use my sort of snapping tools and maybe like put some roof on there. Whoa, yeah, check this out. And then for the next 8 hours, you sit in a studio doing this. Oh yeah, look at that architecture. So much work going on right now. Oh, it's absolutely incredible. And then maybe you go, oh, okay, I'm going to find some kind of YouTube tutorial to do. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do this for another half an hour. And then maybe I'm going to have some lunch. And then I'm going to like catch up with some friends. And then I'm going to do this for another 45 minutes. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to say, what a productive day I had. Your brain cannot cope with a solid like 8-10 hours of the kind of level of thinking that you have to be acting at when you're translating the ideas and thoughts you're having into 3 dimensions on a screen. So what we have to do is we have to stop and we have to break up the process. We have to say, if my brain can go 20 minutes at like full bore, then after that point, I'm getting diminishing returns and I need to switch it up. The way in which I work, and I'll find, this is sort of hopefully not shameless self-promotion, but I tend to put lots of work in progress on Instagram. So this is the easiest way I've found of finding my process and my way of working. Can I log in? Yes, let's hope so. Fine, great. Here we are. Let's find an example. So here we go. So this is something out of my sketchbook. And I think you'd all agree it's not very good. I don't even know half of what the lines I drew were. But then it turns into this, right? At some point, that becomes that. How long do you think that process takes? Go from there to there. Like certainly not 20 minutes, certainly not a few days, probably more like a period of weeks, right? But if you break it down, what's really going on is this is an incredibly digital process, but look how many hand sketches I've done as this progresses. And it's starting to form something here, but it's still done with a paper and a pencil. And then it becomes, and this is one of the ways that I find working the best. What's going on here is this is a digital model, which I've built in Rhino, but then I've taken either a screenshot of it or I've done Make 2D, which I showed you very briefly and I'll show you again today. I've basically turned it into some two-dimensional lines. And then what have I done? Anyone guess what's happened here? Yeah? I sketch it, but what happened first? Before I could sketch over it, what did I do? I printed it. It's a magic word beginning with P. So there's a rule. And I mean, I don't always obey this rule, but when I obey this rule, my productivity is through the roof. The rule is every 30 minutes, you print what you have done in Rhino. And when I say print, I don't mean like save it to a PDF. I mean, there's a physical piece of paper that you have got from a printer. You've had to get up off your desk. You've had to walk to the printer. Maybe you've got some muscles going. Maybe you've got some blood flowing to your brain. You pick up the piece of paper. You carry the weight of the piece of paper back to your desk. And then you take a pen or a piece of watercolor or a Sharpie or a colored something or other. And the next 5-10 minutes, you spend sketching over that thing, which is really interesting to me because my director's title in the firm I'm at is digital director. And I spend most of my time telling people to print their work and use a pen, which is like quite ironic to me because you'd have thought that I would spend most of my time telling people to use a computer. Interestingly, you don't have to tell people to use computers. They will sit there and sit at a computer for hours and hours at a time. However, what they're actually doing is this. So it's not particularly helpful. It's a kind of a waste of time. So actually, what happens when we design things is that these moments when we switch context from digital to paper, or from digital to a model, or from a two-dimensional set of lines to a 3D print or a CNC cut, or you've gone down to the workshop and you've actually cut something out of wood. Those are the moments when the design actually moves onwards. And there's something kind of, you can see lots of really interesting similarities between this sketch here and this moment here, but it's changed, it's moved on, it's not the same as it was before. And I certainly haven't just had a 3D model that I've just kind of like looked at for another 8 hours. So it's really important that we kind of keep moving our digital designs on. And so one of the things I want to try and do today, and it's quite difficult because I don't have a printer and it's quite difficult to show you, I mean, you know how to sketch because you spent all of first year sketching, so I don't need to teach you that. But what I want to try and do is to say, by the end of this little period of time, I would like to have something that isn't a digital 3D thing that I have to rotate on the screen. I want something that is printable that I can put in front of someone else and have a conversation about it. Does that kind of make sense? Cool. So the first curry, probably, I don't know, half an hour, is clearly going to be, we're going to model something. And I want to show you some techniques. And actually what I want to do is introduce you to a really useful resource, which will show you loads more techniques. And there'll be definitely tons of stuff in that resource that will be really helpful to you if you want to go deeper into rhinoceros in particular, but 3D modeling in general. And then I want to say, right, wherever we've got to after about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes if we're being generous, because we're demoing rather than just me sitting at my desk, sort of blasting through stuff. After about 45 minutes, we're going to switch modes. We're going to switch into, I'm not modeling anymore. Now I'm creating something different. I'm producing an image or a drawing or a screenshot or something I can get out of Rhino. Does that sort of lay out where we're trying to get to today? Good. So this resource is Rhino Level 1, the training manual PDF. And if you thought that the Rhino user interface looked a bit dated, welcome to the Rhino Level 1 training manual PDF. It's the first hit Amazon Web Services. It's a PDF called Rhino Level 1 training. Worth making a little note of. You just Google Rhino Level 1 training, and here we are. And what you'll notice is that this is like Rhino 6, but it doesn't matter. We're on Rhino version 8, but everything in this training manual is going to be the same between Rhino version 6, version 7, version 8. There's a new version 9 that's kind of a work in progress, but everything in this manual is going to be the same because it's all quite simple stuff about how you could basically model any shape you could think of. There are 360 pages. Do not try and read the whole thing. Unless you're like super into this and you want to become the world's expert in Rhino, don't waste your time reading 360 pages of it. However, what you can do is kind of skim through and potentially there's two ways of using this. The first is I've forgotten how the gumball works. That was one of the questions from last week, wasn't it? I was like, can you just remind me how this gumball thing works? Well, what you can do is you can open up that PDF, type Control F to search through that PDF in a browser or a PDF viewer. And then we're going to type the word gumball and, oh, look, more on the gumball. And then I can click on that. And then there's an exercise. Exercise 7.6, gumball menu. In this exercise, we will drag gumball arrows to move an object. 3 direction arrows, X, Y, and Z, control the direction. Here we go. Everything that I told you in that lecture condensed into one page of a PDF. And a little exercise that you do, and everything that you need to know about the gumball condensed into, what was that, 2 A4 pages. And you can give yourself 10 minutes, work through that little exercise, and then you're an expert on the gumball. So that's one way of using this PDF. Super useful. If you've written down something in your notes that I've said, and you're like, I don't quite understand that, try searching for it in this PDF. The other thing you can do is, as you look through, you might see something and you're like, that's interesting. I wish I knew how to create that shape. Well, turns out, look at that. Here's exercise 8.3, practice with curves and control point editing. The glass model contains a picture frame of a glass profile, blah, 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 blah. This comes with some inbuilt models, so you can kind of open them up and they're kind of already done for you, but it shows you exactly what we're doing. This is what I showed you last week. It's the revolve tool. We made that cup, or 2 weeks ago, we made that cup, remember? And we had that revolve tool with an axis in the middle, and then we revolved a thing around it, and you can make super cool shapes. And if you're not sure about what you can do with those shapes, there's a lot of really interesting input. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at chapter 9, which is creating deformable shapes, which is a particular way of working that lots of 3D modelers encourage you to use, which is that we're going to start with a really simple shape, the way that people who work with clay do. We start with a blob of clay, and then we're going to continually work into it until we've made a rubber duck. It's the most exciting rubber duck you've ever seen. So here we go. We're going to start off with a new file, and this is what we're going to end up making, a rubber duck. And you'll see also this rubber duck has materials. So it's like colored yellow and orange and white and black. And it's also got this kind of like sheen, this like shiny texture to it. So we're going to have to make sure that we make that model texture. And then we can do more things with that rubber duck once we're done. Now, obviously, architecture and a duck, there's an interesting overlap. If you want to read about the postmodernists, I'm sure you do that in your theory lessons. But this is not about modeling architecture and specifically, this is about modeling anything, that there'll be things that we learn about how we model this duck that you'll suddenly realize, oh, that's how you do that kind of shape, or that's how we're going to approach this thing. So the first thing, talks you through it. We're going to create some basic shapes. On the solid menu, click sphere, and then click center and radius. In the front viewport, pick a point to specify the center of the sphere. So let's go here, and we're going to go into my front viewport. So we're going to just take the instructions at their word. I am going to make the grid a little bit bigger. There we go. So I'm in my front viewport. I'm going to make a sphere. And there's two ways of doing that. I can type the word sphere, and then it says center of sphere, and then we pick a point. Or we can do it in the menu, which is under solid tools. Oh, no, it's not solid tools. It's solid menu, which is actually has changed. It's under this one here. And where's my sphere gone? There it is. Center sphere radius. So I can find it in the menu, or I can just click, I can type the word sphere. It's way quicker because I know I need to make a sphere. A couple of things I can do here. I can either pick a point just in my scene, or I can type 0, 0, 0, and that will put my point right in the middle of my file. And just for sort of neatness, I'm going to choose the point 0, 0, 0. Just typed 0, 0, 0. Let's put it right in the middle of my file. Then I'm going to drag out this sphere, and I'm going to make a really big rubber duck. I can see my people there, so they help me sort of with my scale. I'm going to make a huge rubber duck, about yay big. There we go. And then I'm going to repeat this procedure for the second sphere, which we're also going to put to the left of the center pivot. So basically what we're going to end up doing here is sphere again. And I'm going to put another sphere here up in the top. Oh no, come back. There we go. And you might be able to tell already, I'm holding down the shift key actually to help visualize this. So let me put my key press mode on. There we go. Here we go. I'm holding down the shift key, and you might be able to already tell what might be going on here, which is that this is going to end up being the duck's body, and this is going to end up being the duck's head. You kind of with me so far? Now, who would have thought if you want to model a rubber duck, the first thing you're going to do is put down two spheres? Might not be that obvious, but as we go through the process, you'll kind of see, that's why we're going to start with this. Most people doing 3D modeling, they start with either a box or a sphere. They just like put one down, and then they start working into it. That's basically how a lot of 3D modeling is done, especially in the kind of animation industry and that kind of thing. Now, I'm still in my front viewport, and I can change my mind about exactly how big this sphere is and where it's going to sit. I'm going to sort of pick it about there. I'm just going to do this by eye. There we are. Then we're going to select both these spheres, and on the edit menu, click rebuild. In the rebuild surface dialog box, change the point count to 8 for both U and V. Now, you might not understand any of the words that have just been spoken. However, we kind of get to understand them by doing them. So what we're going to do, in the edit menu, click rebuild. I'm going to select both of these spheres. In the edit menu, click rebuild. Where's rebuild? There it is. Just following the instructions. That's all I'm doing. And then, I'm going to go back here. In the rebuild surface dialog box, change the point count to 8 for both U and V. What rebuild does is it changes the number of control points that I have given to my sphere. When you put down a sphere by default, I think it makes something like 16 control points, and we're increasing the number of control points that you have available so that we can go into a bit more articulated detail about how this sphere is going to actually look. So point count U is 8, point count V is 8. They want 8 for both of them. Change the degree to 3 for both U and V. So I'm going to leave you don't even need to understand what degree means. It just says leave it at 3. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to press OK. Boom. And what you'll notice, I'm just undo, an extra few lines, an extra few isocurves have just appeared on these spheres. So if I click Control Y and redo it, I've got more isocurves. I said before, a few weeks ago, more isocurves is usually a bad thing. But more isocurves in this situation gives us more control. And it was basically, the problem was we didn't have enough before. So we're giving ourselves just a little bit more of those control points to play with. The equivalent is that loft that we did before. We're just adding one more line to it or something. So here we are. Now, what we're going to do. The spheres are now deformable. Having more control points allows more control over smaller parts of the surface. A degree 3 surface will have a smoother shape when deformed. So that's what the degree does. It basically means that we're not going to have so many kinks, but it's going to be a nice smooth surface where those control points, well, we'll see in a second. If I press F10, F10, there we go. All of these control points are now available to us, but do you see how they're actually quite sort of separated out from where the actual surface is? They're the kind of magnetic ones. They're called NURBS control points. And they mean that I can start pushing them around, but the surface doesn't actually touch them. So they're kind of like magnets that I can pull and push and start to deform this clay. Right, so here we go. Select the large sphere. On the Edit menu, click Control Points and then click Control Points On. Well, I've given you a shortcut for that, which is just to hit F10. That's the same as Control Points On. F10. In the front viewport, select the control points near the bottom of the sphere. To window select, drag a rectangle left to right around the control points. This is remember, our opposite of our Simba, everything the light touches selection. So what it's saying is, I'm going to select all of these points down the bottom, and I'm going to do it left to right. The reason I want to do it left to right, well, there's a reason for everything in this little tutorial that it's doing, is because if I go right to left, it's going to select the whole sphere because it's touched the sphere. Whereas I just want the control points. So that's all I need. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set PT. I'm going to type set PT, and that sets, in this case, I'm going to turn Y and X off. It's going to set the Z component of the location of these points. Now, that might not make too much sense, but if I demonstrate it, you'll kind of get it. That it's going to set all of these points to have a Z value of wherever I put my mouse. And what that's done is effectively taken all these points and smushed them into one plane. There's another way of actually doing this. I don't even need to use the set point command. What I could do is turn on points, F10, select all of these, and then use the scale command. And the scale command has this nice way of just snapping into one place. So we've taken all these points and we've flattened them out. So they're all sitting on one Z plane in height. And then I can move these up and down. I'm going to move them to about there. There we go. And then what I want to end up doing is I'm going to do very similar things by taking this and smushing it out a little bit. There we go. So I'm scaling it out in this particular direction like that. There we go. Do you see how this is kind of starting to look a little bit more like a duck? Are you enjoying the process? Am I going a little bit too fast? No? Oh, good, great. Sort of with me so far. Okay, lovely. Then what do we want to do? Well, where's my duck? What page was it on? There we go. Here we are. We've scaled out this bottom bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring the body of the duck in line with the head. So they're actually touching. So the way we're going to do this is, again, it's going to be a left to right selection. We're just going to select the control point. We don't want to move the whole sphere. And I'm going to move these up so that they're kind of like clashing with the head. And you see now this gives the duck this kind of really nice shape. And actually, just thinking about it, what it might be nice to do is kind of move the tail out this way a little bit as well. So now I've got this kind of nice shape of a duck. And then I can also make the tail of the duck that kind of goes up into the sky like this by selecting these control points. Remember, I'm still in my front viewport, so I'm looking sideways on. If I come into my perspective viewport, actually what I did was I selected 2 control points. They're just basically like behind each other in this view. So we're working kind of in 2D basically. And then I'm going to bring this guy up and I'm going to select this one and kind of like push him down a little bit. Maybe he needs more of a sort of tail like this. There we go. And to help me out, I might just move this to ghosted mode so you can kind of see that this thing has a 3D kind of nature to it. I might bring this guy down and I might also bring these 2 guys up a little bit. So now I'm basically turning a sphere into a rubber duck. You kind of with me so far? And actually you can kind of do this to taste. You can like pick some control points and just see what difference it's going to make. Maybe I want to pick these ones here and just bring them forward a little bit. Have a little bit more of a kind of like a puffed out Robin Redbreast kind of chest look to this duck. Anyway, I can play with that to my heart's content, really. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add an extra control point around this tail. Because I don't know if you can see here, I've got one set of control points up here. And then the very next control point I've got is kind of down here. And it would be really nice to have one in between where I could like sculpt in the tail of the duck a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type insert control point. Or actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to insert not, I think is what the tutorial asked me to do. And insert not. And I'm going to select a curve or surface for knot insertion. A knot, all a knot is one of these lines, one of these isocurves. So I'm going to select this. And then by default, it's going to add an extra knot going in this direction, like around the body. That isn't quite what I want. Actually, what I'd like to do is to toggle the direction, and I'd like to add an extra one here. So I'm going to press go. There we go. And now what I have is I have one control point here. I have the same control point I had before, but I have an extra one in between. And that allows me to kind of further control this duck's tail shape. So I can kind of bring this up with a little bit more of a kind of swoosh. I don't know exactly about the best way of getting this done, but yeah, something like that. I might actually bring this in a little bit there. There we go. Fun, right? Are we having fun modeling a duck? Okay. Now, what I want to do, in this case, actually what it's done is they've said bring this all the way down like that. I think that's probably a little bit much, but, you know, each to their own. And now we can go into our 3D world and we can see that we're looking at this rubber duck, which is kind of looking quite nice. It's looking fun. However, the head isn't there yet. We really aren't there with the head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to turn the head points on just by using the F10 key. And then I'm going to take this end control point and I'm going to drag it up. Way, now we're really looking like a duck. It's amazing how literally I've just moved a couple of control points and we've gone from a sphere to a rubber duck. And it doesn't take too much longer than, you know, anything else. You could imagine at this point, just to come back to my original point, you could imagine doing something right now. What could you do? You could type view capture to file, browse, find somewhere in your file systems, save this screenshot, come back to the desktop, and I'm going to go by date modified, there it is, And I could take this screenshot here and I could do, where's my print button? There it is, print. I can print this out. I can grab a piece of paper with the progress that I've got so far, and I can start sketching over and decide, well, how do I want to continue this work? I'm just going to push ahead right now because I'm going a little bit too slowly for that, but I want to sort of demonstrate and model as much as possible. This is good modeling practice. We've been going for 20 minutes. We're going to print something out and we'll sketch over it. Okay. Back to our instructions that we're following. Is this quite helpful so far in terms of understanding how, there we go, how people now are able to model quite complicated shapes out of just very, very simple ones. This is moving this way. So the duck is kind of giving a little nice smile sort of shape. There we go. And what they're doing here is they're kind of pushing in the bit just on top of the beak. So they've taken this control point here and they're kind of like pushing it downwards so the beak has some kind of more articulation. You know, you can kind of do this to taste. Next stage, separate the bill from the head. So the beak of this duck, we want to separate these two things. And this is a really, really cool technique. I use this technique all the time. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a curve, and we're going to use the curve to split up a surface. And the cool thing about this curve is it's not even going to touch the surface. The viewport we're in is going to provide us with something really, really powerful. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come over here and I'm going to create a control point curve. And I'm going to lay down, for some reason, planar is on, ortho is on, there we go. I'm going to lay down a control point curve with 5 control points. I don't need any more than that. And I can sort of come and play with these and exactly where they sit. But effectively, what I've ended up doing is I've ended up drawing, I might just move this that way just a touch. There we go, something like that. I've ended up drawing a curve that sits just in space right bang in the middle of this thing. It doesn't actually matter where it ends up sitting. I've drawn it like way over here. It doesn't actually matter. But when I look at the front viewport, it looks like, because I'm in that orthogonal viewport, it looks like that curve is kind of intersecting with my 3D shape. Yeah? Just because of the way that that view is set up. Well, if you're in a viewport like an orthogonal one, this front viewport, and you can see a curve intersecting a piece of solid geometry, even if it doesn't actually touch it in 3 dimensions, even if that curve is way over there, if you can see it intersect, you can use the curve to trim or to split some 3D geometry. And I'm going to type split, and it says select objects to split. Well, I want to split up the duck's head, please. And then it says press enter when done. So I'm going to press enter when done. Then it says select cutting objects. And imagine this curve is not a curve. Imagine it's a lightsaber that goes an infinite number of miles in both directions in the view that you are looking at it in. So this curve has now become an object that I can use to split up my geometry like a lightsaber or a cookie cutter, even though it isn't actually touching it. I'm going to select cutting objects. I'm going to select this curve. Because I'm in this view, when I press enter, what it does is it splits up the beak. Whoop, there we go. In fact, actually, it split up the beak into 2 because actually they were part of a sphere. All I need to do now is select those 2 things and join them together. So I press join. There we go. So now I've got a beak which is split by this curve, and it gives me this really, really nice piece of kind of interesting curved geometry where a curve has intersected with something that's kind of like a squished sphere. But it's exact, it's perfect, because we used this curve like a lightsaber to do it. Here we are. We've got my beak here, and I've got the rest of my head here. So I've separated them out. And quite rightly, you're probably thinking, well, this is all very nice, but the duck's neck isn't doing very well here. Oh, can't hear you, silly thing. Where are you, Mr. Duck? Here we go. The duck's neck isn't very good because all these things are just two spheres that are just kind of like colliding into one another. So one of the things that we could do is what we showed you before, which is a Boolean union, where you could Boolean these things together and then they become one object. I'm going to show you something even a little bit nicer than that, which is I'm going to come into my front viewport again, and I'm going to use that same technique of using a line to cut the geometry. I'm going to use a straight line in this case, put a straight line through the bottom of the head, boom. I'm going to put a straight line through the top of the body, like that. There we go. And then I'm going to select this line. I'm going to type trim. Trim is like split, but instead of splitting the things into two, trim just gets rid of whatever you click. So it's like the opposite of a split, and it does a bit of tidying up for you as you go. So now I'm going to trim, and I'm going to trim this bit of the body that's on top of the curve. Boom, there you go, it's gone. And I can show you that in 3D. That line has now been used like a lightsaber to just chop the top of that geometry off. Like taking a knife to an egg or something, a hard-boiled egg. We're going to do exactly the same to the bottom of the duck's head. I'm going to type trim, and I'm going to click on the bottom of this, and boom, it's gone. Let's go back into 3D here. There we go. Now, you might be thinking, well, why have you got rid of that geometry? Surely that would have been useful. Well, the reason is what we now have. Let's just take a look at this little moment here. At this moment, we've got a curved surface that kind of comes down. This is the back of the duck's head. And what we'd really like is for it to feel like one cohesive object. So it would be really nice if the curved surface of the duck's head kind of then blended back together with the curved surface of the back of the duck. Wouldn't that be nice? So like if we were going to sketch it, I can try and do this with, I think I have the right tools. Let's just try. Yeah, here we go. Just make sure this is recording. Yes, it is. Good. I'm using a remote computer, so I can't really draw very easily. But effectively, what we're wanting to do is we would print this out and we would draw this kind of nice curve where we say, well, this curve here is going to keep going for a little bit, and it's going to kind of turn around a corner, and then it's kind of blend in with whatever the curvature of this surface was. And wouldn't it be nice if this bit here, it keeps going for a little bit, and then it kind of turns around, and then it kind of blends in with the curvature of here. So it felt like one cohesive object. Well, turns out there is a way of doing that, and it's called blend surf. We're going to blend these two surfaces together. So here we go. Select first edge, it tells us to do. So I'm going to select this edge. Here we go. Select second edge. I'm going to select this edge. And I'm going to click in the same kind of place so the two line up. And then it's chosen these 2 points here and put arrows facing the same direction, which is quite helpful. So it's made sure that the orientation of these surfaces is kind of going to match up. And I like that. That's fine. If it come the other way round, then you can have a little bit of a fun time where like one of the arrows is going one way, one of the arrows is going the other, and that would like really mess things up. But it's worked out that what I want to do is blend these two surfaces together. I'm going to press enter, and I'm just going to press OK. And now what I have is this neck, which starts off completely in line with the head geometry and ends up completely in line with the body geometry, but blends the two together. Do you want me to show you that one more time, or are you fairly happy with that? Yeah? Shall I show you that one more time? So I'll just get rid of this. What we've ended up with is one set of curved geometry and another set of curved geometry. We want to blend between the two. So I'm going to type blend surface, blend surf. It says select first edge. I'm going to select the head edge. It says select second edge. So I'm going to select this edge. And these are open edges. These are like I've sliced through them, so they're just open to the world. They're kind of ready and waiting to be blended with by their nature of being open surfaces. It's worked out that the arrows are going in the right direction, so we're happy with that. Press enter. Actually, I can start to adjust some things here. I can say, actually, I want things to be blending more towards the head and less towards the body. Or I can say I want the head to kind of like push in, and then to kind of, it's going to end up having to hit round a really weird corner in order to do that. So actually, like probably it's not far off on the just default position, but I can start playing with that if I wanted to. Yeah, there we go. Something like that. Maybe that's quite nice. I'm going to press OK. And now what I've got is this model. I can press join. I can type join. It's joined it all into one object that feels like one cohesive structure. Happy so far? Good. There we go. That's what I've just shown. Blend surface. That's exactly what we were just playing with. There we go. Now we're going to make an eye that sits on the surface. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to start organizing our model if we absolutely, well, we really, really should, which is going to make a new layer, and we'll call this body. And I'm going to, it's going to let me expand this out. There we go. The body, I want for now just to be colored as kind of, I don't know, like a yellow color. And I'm going to select this body and right click and do change object layer. So now my body is on this layer that's colored yellow. Then I want a new layer, and I'm going to call it Veek. And I'm going to change the color to a kind of orangey color. There we go. Select that. Change object layer. There I am. So now I'm a bit more organized. Now we need to create an eye. We need to create an eye that sits on top of this surface. This is going to be a little bit more tricky, isn't it? Because this eye isn't going to be oriented to the XYZ plane. It's going to be probably like off to one side, and kind of we've got to line it up with this curvy surface that we've just made. So we've kind of given ourselves a bit of a challenge. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to use our good friend, the revolve tool, and I'm going to make an eye down here on the ground. Just going to make one sitting pretty on the ground. First thing I need is an axis to revolve around. And then the next thing I need is a curve that's going to sort of define what the eye is going to look like. I'm just going to sort of choose this kind of, I don't know, bulbous shape here. I'm going to type revolve, select curves to revolve. I'm going to select this one, press enter when done. Start of revolve axis. Well, I've drawn a line that forms the revolve axis, so there it is. Start angle 0, end angle 360, and I'm just going to take the defaults. Now I've made this eye on the floor, but you'll see this eye is now far too big. So I can't just drag and drop it. I need to scale it down. So I'm just going to hold down this little scale thing and hold down shift, and then make it just a little bit more reasonable in size. That'll probably do. Now, what I'd quite like with this eye, I'll go into my top view. What I'd quite like to do with this eye is I'd like a white bit and a black bit. So I need to split this apart into a white part of the eye and a black part of the eye, and then I need to put them on different layers. So I'm going to do exactly the same as we did before. I'm going to draw a circle. And that circle is sitting here, not even touching the surface. But I'm going to my top view. I'm going to type split, select objects to split. I'm going to select this eye, enter when done. Select cutting objects. It's a circle. Go. Excellent. So now what I have is the middle bit of my eye and the outside bit of my eye split up just by drawing a line and then using the split tool. Here we go. I'm going to make a new layer and call it eye. And then I can do this cool thing, which I recommend you get really good at, which is using sublayers. I'm going to make a sublayer within I called black, and a new sublayer within I called white. And the white bit is going to be colored white, and the black bit is going to be colored black. There we go. Just so I can tell what's going on. And I'm going to select this black bit of the eye, change object layer, and there it is. And I'm going to select this bit of the eye, change object layer, and it goes onto my white thing. So the lines will change to be white. So I'm basically organizing my model for my process and keeping everything super organized. If I wanted to, it might be a useful thing that every time I select this eye, what I don't want to do is like move one bit and then get them all messed up. I have to move them back. And if I'm not careful, what I'm going to end up doing is kind of moving them back, but not quite get it right. And then I'm going to get these kind of weird little moments where it doesn't quite add up. So instead, what I might do is select both this bit and this bit by holding down Shift, and then I can type group. And that will turn them into a group selection where when I click one, it'll select all of them. Just the same as you would group things together in like Photoshop or InDesign or PowerPoint or anything. So here we go. We've got a little group. This is our eye. Now, here's the cool bit. I really like this because we've got to get this eye onto our rubber duck. And you might be thinking, okay, well, I've got a tool for that. It's called the gumball. And what I can do is I can sort of like, I'm just going to make a copy of this. I can sort of drag this up and kind of put it roughly where I want it to go. And then you're like, well, yeah, okay, but that's not how a duck's eye really looks, unless it's like a cyclops or something. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. And then, okay, so right, what I need to do is I need to come out of here. I need to find this eye, and then I need to kind of like move it over here. But then I also need to like rotate it. So I need to get really good at using this gumball, and then I kind of rotate it around this way like this. Oh, but then there's this kind of gap here, and I need to move it down. And I'm kind of getting there, but like actually when I look at this, it's not quite in the right position. And you can spend hours just like moving things a tiny bit with a gumball. This is the other thing that people do. They either do this for hours and hours and hours, or they do this for hours and hours and hours. And both of them are a complete waste of your very precious and important and useful time. Oh, no, not quite. No. We've got better things to be doing with our time. Let's be clever. Right, I'm going to get rid of that eye. I'm going to use a tool. Use a command called orient. Should I use orient 3-point or orient on surface? I'm going to use orient on surf. Orient a thing onto a surface. If I just pause for a second, picture in your mind what I might mean by orienting something onto a surface. And then I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to see whether your expectation matches up with reality. Because if it does, you're starting to understand how Rhino really works. If it doesn't, you're still starting to understand how Rhino really works because you're learning how Rhino talks about things. It might not always be the same way that we always talk about things. Orient on surf. I'm going to follow the instructions. Select objects to orient. Here's our... Try it one more time. I selected the curve, not the eye. Orient on surface. Select objects to orient. Here we go. Select the group. Enter when done. Base point. Well, the base point is going to be the bottom of my revolve line. Or really, at the end of the day, what we could do is use our center snap. And if I do this, I hover my mouse over the edge of my eye, and then it will select the center of that circle. There it is. Reference point for scaling and rotation. I'm going to come out to the edge of my eye like this. There we go. Surface to orient on. This one. And now what does it say? It says uniform scale. So I don't want to change the scale. I'm pretty happy with how big my eye is. I don't need to make it bigger or smaller. I want to make it rigid, so I don't need to deform it or sort of bend it in any way. And I don't need to rotate it. So I'm going to press OK, keep all the default settings. Point on surface to orient to. And this is where it gets super cool, because all I need to do is hover my mouse over the surface and let's make this bigger so we can actually see. And as I hover over, it's because I've got my center snap still on. There we go, turn the center snap off. As I hover over the surface, I can pick, come here, you. I think I'm going to take my O snaps off. Oh, it's working really well for this surface. Do you see? As I hover my mouse over, it's orienting the eyeball exactly in line with where the surface is going to be. What's going on is I selected the neck bit of the surface, not the head bit of the surface. So I need to do that one more time. That was me messing up. Orient on surface, select objects here, enter when done. Base point, so center snap on. Come here, you. There it is. There's my center. We come out to the edge. Surface to orient on. I'm going to make sure I select this surface, not this surface. I think I selected this one by accident. I'm going to select this one. There it is. We keep all the defaults. Now we're cooking. Everywhere I put my mouse, this eye is going to be perfectly lined up with the surface. Doesn't take long at all. I don't have to faff around with a gumball for 17 hours to get it exactly right. And I'm going to place my eye. Let's go around about there. There we go. I'm done. I press enter. And now I've got my one-eyed duck. Not very exciting, but you know, the cool thing about this duck is that I can come into my top viewport and I've got a line that sits in exactly the center of the duck because that's what I drew when I used it to cut the duck in two. So I can use that line to mirror my eye across from one side to the other. And now my duck has two eyes. Now there's one thing that's going on that's slightly wrong, is that this eye is now sort of floating up in the sky, which isn't quite what I wanted. So the reason for that is because I've chosen the base point of my eye to be exactly at the bottom of this circle, but the curved surface kind of curves away from it, so it ends up with this little gap. Well, there's a nice, easy solution to that, which is I'm going to make a curve that starts at the center and kind of goes up like this, and then I'm just going to drag that curve up so that the center point that I'm going to use is not actually the bottom of the eye, but it's kind of like slightly above it. So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to get rid of these eyes that I did before, and I'm going to type orient for the third time lucky. Orient on surface, select objects to orient. Here we go. Press enter when done. Base point. I'm going to select the bottom of this line. Do you see the bottom of that line is now a bit higher up in the sky? So hopefully my eye that curves down is now going to actually intersect with the surface I want to orient it with. Press there. Reference points. It doesn't really matter too much. I'll just select the same point I did before. And then it says surface to orient on. So I need to come over here, select this surface. There we go. Select the defaults. And yeah, now we're cooking. This is looking pretty good. Oh, it's... Ugh. My reference point was at a funny angle. That's why it wasn't working. Fourth time lucky. This is the hardest bit of the whole thing. Select objects. End of here. Here's my reference point. Surface to orient on. There it is. Let's come over here. There we go. Much nicer. So my duck's eye, should we go about there? There we go. And I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to mirror it using my top view. And I've got the duck's eye is kind of nicely intersecting with that surface now. So I'm pretty happy. And we've made a big rubber duck. And now we're pretty much done with the modeling. We can switch off the bit of our brain that's trying to work out how to model this thing, and we can switch on the bit of our brain that's saying, well, what can we do with this? What could we do? Well, wouldn't it be nice to make the duck into like a sofa or something? That might be fun. So yeah, there we go. This nice model of a woman is going to be, you might just need to sort of like rotate her around a little bit so she's sitting on the duck's back. I might even switch to a rendered viewport here so I can kind of see what's going on. Oh, she's a bit buried in the duck, so I might just bring her out a little bit. There we go. There we go. There's a nice little scene that I've created. And of course, now that we're also out of the world of like needing to worry about the modeling of the geometry, we can start worrying about other things like, well, wouldn't it be nice if these things had some materials? Oh, well, yeah, would it be great, wouldn't it? Because when we added the layers, we just added these colors just to kind of track what layers we were on. But we haven't added any materials. These are all just blank white circles at the moment. So I'm going to spend 2 minutes just to make some materials. So the first thing I'm going to do here is that body is yellow. And I'm going to press this material, this white thing here. And it brings up my material dialog. And what it's going to do is basically any material that I have in this dialog is going to be applied to everything that's on that layer. You see why organizing my layers was really important? Because now I can do this in like no time at all. Default material, well, actually, I want to use, should we use a plastic material? Well, yeah, rubber ducks are plastic, aren't they? Here we go, plastic. Suddenly, that was plaster before. When I switch to plastic, in my rendered viewport, suddenly I get these really lovely, like, shiny reflections for free. There we go. And maybe I don't want the color to be white. Maybe I want the color to be a nice yellow. There we go. Look at that. It's probably a little bit garish. Let's just tone down that yellow a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit warmer. There we go. Yeah, that's nice. Now, reflectivity is currently at 100%, so it's super, super, super shiny. But plastic isn't really that shiny most of the time. So let's just take that down a little bit. And do you see how the reflections are now just calm it down. Just a little bit less. The clarity of those reflections as well is currently at 100%. You can literally see like the window reflections of the main light that's being put onto the scene. Let's just take that clarity down and we'll make it a little bit more like dull, because that's usually pretty much what plastic is like. We can kind of overcome that with more reflectivity, but less clarity. And we get this kind of like slightly duller, but slightly more nice things here. I press OK. And now what I've done is I've applied a yellow plastic material to the body layer, which means that all the things on that layer get that material. And when I switch to rendered view, I can actually see what's going on. I'm going to do exactly the same to the beak. So I'm going to come in here. I want a plastic material. I want the color to be orange. I might just kind of make it a little bit more extreme. There we go. Oh, this is starting to look pretty good. It's probably a little bit too shiny for my liking, so I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Usually leave some clarity there. There we go. And we're just playing with the faders to taste. My eye, white of my eye is at the moment this kind of thing, but actually I want it to be plastic, and let's make it white. And again, let's bring the reflection and clarity just down a little bit so it's still shiny, but not too much. And then similarly, I want a plastic material. Now, things are very rarely fully white or fully black in real life. So if I make the material of this completely black, it's basically just all light disappears into it. But in reality, things aren't ever totally black. So it's useful to kind of give yourself just a little bit of room to maneuver. So it's kind of a really dark grey. And then similarly, let's bring the reflectivity and the clarity down on that. There we go. Press OK. And now here I've got a fairly fun little scene with a duck with some materials that I've modeled and put together in, what was that, an hour? And you could almost certainly follow along with this video and do it faster than I did, because I've been explaining as I went. And you could learn from my mistakes and not do the orient on surface command 4 times before it worked. So here we go. And isn't this lovely? Well, you know what would be even nicer if we remembered to save our work. Here we go. Save your work. I think we've got up to number 6 now. That's good. Save your work 006. Now, of course, at this point, you've got a tutorial in 5 minutes. What are we going to do? Well, we're not going to show our tutors just some Revit or Rhino window. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a view that tells me a little bit about this scene. Maybe I want, a wall that's kind of in the background that goes here, and maybe I want there to be a floor. Woo! I'm just making some boxes here. There we go. And now I've got some nice shadows that are working. I can take this line and this line and this line. Oh, no, this line. These are our kind of construction curves. We don't actually need to see them anymore, so I can just type hide. So I'm kind of tidying up my scene. I'm going to set up a view. I might even do this. I'm going to come into, select nothing at all, and then come into my properties. And this allows me to change the lens length of the camera. So at the moment, I'm at a 50mm lens, which is kind of like a human eye. But I can make this a wider angle camera lens. So I can kind of come in a bit closer to my scene and get a bit more of this kind of perspective. There's some people, and they're kind of watching. I'm setting up this little dialogue, and this is, actually, this is something that maybe I really want to have a conversation about how people are going to inhabit my scene and my space. Maybe I need to have a roof over the top of this. So I'm going to come out here and put a roof over the top. There we go. And maybe that roof needs some holes to let the light through. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to make some, there we go. Ooh, some really interesting little holes that are going to make the light travel in interesting ways through. And I'm going to type make hole. And I'm going to make a hole through the ceiling like that. And now I've got all these really interesting, like skylighty type things. And I'm going to turn the sun on, which I talked to you about yesterday in tech. And turn the sun on. Here we go. I've got manual control over that. And that means I can change the direction of these shadows. Maybe I want to see those, what's the word? I want to see those shadows cast by the holes that I've just drilled in the wall, in the roof. And it also strikes me that things are a little bit bright. So I'm just going to bring my skylight down so it's not quite so intense. There we go. Yeah, that'll do. And basically at this point, I'm pretty happy with that. I can have a really interesting conversation with my tutor about the fact that there's this weird duck sitting there in space. I might just lift it up so you can see the kind of bottom of it there. There we go. And view capture to file. I'm going to make sure the width is 1920 and the height is 1080. So this is HD image, 1080. Thank you very much. And I'm going to capture that view. Then here we are. I'm going to print that out. I can take it to my tutor, and I said it was 5 minutes for my tutorial, and now I've set up my scene, I've view captured, I've printed it out, and now I've got something with a piece of paper that I can put in front of someone, and I can sit there with a pen, equivalent of a pen. Do I actually have one? Yes, I do. Look at that. And you can have a whole wonderful conversation where you say, hey, wouldn't it be great if these things here were like that way a little bit? And wouldn't it be great if the duck was just a little bit smaller? Actually, I think it's a bit too big. And wouldn't it be great if there was like maybe a doorway here? And this is a bit funny. What's happening here? Is the rain coming in? Or is there some kind of like other bit of roof that we need to worry about? And then you could go away from your tutorial with like a list of things that you need to do next that can move your design on. And I just thought of those off the top of my head. You probably would have thought of exactly the same thing, but I wouldn't have got there if I was stuck in Rhino just kind of doing this. I have to set up the view, I have to print it out, and I have to scribble over it. That's personally me anyway. Any questions on that before we have a quick break and move on to the next thing? Yes? Absolutely. I'll just repeat that for the recording. Is there a way to make sure that this view is to scale, for example, if you're going to try and put this into your portfolio? I'll talk about this when we get into exporting line drawings, because line drawings are a little bit different to perspective views. This perspective view doesn't have an intrinsic scale. The only reason you know how big things are is because you've got people in there. But line drawings are things that you can have scales on. So, for example, here's my top plan. Now it's an orthogonal drawing, so it doesn't have any kind of perspective effects. So basically, that is something I can put to scale. The way I would do that is there are two options. There's an easy option and there's a better option. I'll show you the better one, and you can work out the easy one to your heart's content. The easy one is just to go into a viewport like this and type Control P, and then we're going to print that viewport to PDF. This is literally how. Where did this? This is. This is just print viewport to PDF. Give me the lines that you can see on that viewport and just print them out to a PDF and then chuck them to a printer. And so here we go. I want the print size to be, should we say A1? And then also down here, there's an option to say view and output scale. And that top at the moment is scaled 1:1. Not very helpful to us. Because if we scale it 1:1 and that's the size of a person, well, our A1 paper isn't going to be big enough, right? So instead, what we need to do is we need to choose a scale. So if it's A1, maybe you should go 1:20. There we go. And this A1 is currently portrait, but maybe I'll make it landscape. And you see, basically, it's taken the view that I have here and it's laid it out on an A1 page. And because I set the scale to be 1:20, if you printed this A1, you took this PDF file that's about to be created to Marcello on a PDF on a USB stick, and you say, can you print this at A1, please? Then the scale is going to be 1:20, exactly the same as the model that you've made. So that's how you would get a scale drawing out. There's a slightly nicer way, which is there's a little plus down here. And if you're familiar with layouts in CAD, this is really helpful. That basically you can make a new layout, and we'll call this A1 plan. And we'll set the paper size to be A1. We'll set it to be landscape. We'll press OK. And it's kind of all a bit messed up. But basically what you now have is a viewport that you can double click, and you can go into that viewport and set up your view the way you want it to be, and then save that in your file. And then as you change your file, it will always update. Now, none of this is the same as actually drawing a plan, and I'm going to talk to you about really drawing a plan. But what this does is it allows you to print something out at a scale that you can then sketch over it. So this is kind of like a design process thing, not a, here's my final plan, I'm done. But it's really, really helpful for that. Does that answer your question? Cool. Any other questions? Happy? Let's have a 5-minute break. Whilst you're on that break, can you find yourself a buddy and make a little pact today that if you find yourself spending an hour rotating a model on a screen, that you're going to make a little agreement amongst yourselves that maybe you should help each other out by just reach over and just press Control P on their keyboard to print out wherever they've got to, and then grab a pen. And you will find that your days will become much, much better. We'll get back together here in 5 minutes' time, and then I'll show you some more interesting things. We'll see you in 5 minutes. I'll just stop this recording.